And of course, as a passenger who doesn't work for an airline, who doesn't have the airline helping them, we say, good luck, passengers. It's your responsibility. Go and see what it is you need for this particular country. We had a regulation change from minus 72 to minus 48 hours for testing in Italy, and there was a huge spike of denied boarding. You have a question? You can ask now, of course. This is meant to be a Q&A.
What happens
Yes.
is when you read crisis
It's a
reports,
really good
I'm sure you
question
read all
about the
crisis
source.
reports.
So the question is, what
you
is
don't have
the
to read the
source?
report, but you should read the executive summary.
Oh.
And I'm sure that what you realize is they're all the same. Every executive summary of every crisis is pretty much the same.
We have a voice from above.
So what this has been taken
Hey
word
guys,
for
can you
word.
hear me
I
next
haven't
door as
changed
well?
anything from an executive summary of a crisis.
Oh, they stopped. I think he wanted to answer your question. No, I'm joking. The question was for all of us in the room, it's an obvious question. What is the source of government regulation changes? Who uses Tematic today? You're familiar with Tematic. Now, Tematic is an IATA product which was brilliant before COVID, but it was designed to update rules with about 6 months' notice, and maybe twice a year for each country if that was something catastrophic happening. Today, Tematic does not cope fast enough for our clients. And also, interestingly, have you ever tried to see how Tematic works without a human being? It doesn't. Tematic needs a human being to read the rules and interpret them. So we actually work with digital partners in every single country. We're not the first people at this table to say, hey, Tematic isn't coping. Each country, and actually most airlines already have preferred digital partners in Canada, in Spain, in Europe, across the world, in Asia, who are codifying these rules to make them accessible to a machine. And that's why at Zamna, we have a digital partner to read those machine-readable codified rules instead of having a human being stand over here with a Tematic printout, with the color codes. And you know what? Everything is conditional on Tematic today. Absolutely everything. So we had to find some seriously good digital partners who are built into our technology and update those rules as they come in fast for our software to work with. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it answers, but still there is big liability here.
There's a lot of liability. And this is a really, really important question. Welcome, guys. I hope you had a good coffee break. We're just talking about the challenge behind us of what happens today with governments and airlines and passengers getting the brunt of the changing regulations. The liability today sits where? Sort of over here. It's sort of with the passengers because we don't fly as passengers and we don't board. However, it's the AVSEC and actually the operations who feel the liability keenest. The fines that are issued by the UK government today are, anyone know how much? It's £2,000 a passenger for one data set being wrong. And if we make an average of $7 per seat, what is that? That's mad. You can also get banned. Hong Kong did ban Singapore Airlines for weeks and it cost them millions. So depending on what the government does when they wake up in the morning, you might find that the liability is on the airline. Welcome, guys. Take a seat. So this is the challenge we're discussing because you're right. The liability can be absolutely anywhere. What do we do? The end passengers won't fly if the airlines don't start helping a little bit more. I shared a story yesterday of one of my investors who's an extremely digital guy, has the latest smartphone, 2 young kids under 5, and he said, I'm not flying. I am getting in a car in London and I'm driving to Lisbon in Portugal, where he goes every year, because he didn't want the risk of that liability that something goes wrong. That's not a way to restart travel at scale. It's a lot of anxiety for passengers, and you guys know this better than I do if you work at an airline. So let's talk about what's being done about this. There's a lot of things that are being done. There's a lot of solutions out there. There's a lot of things people are trying. And we're going to use 2 comparisons, and please do stop me. Again, this is meant to be interactive, and I know we have a big room and we don't really know each other, but still, it's meant to be helpful, and I hope what I'm sharing is useful to you today. This skill here is the speed. Everyone we talk to tell us, Irra, we need this solution yesterday. We need something. And the reason we're doing this is because we're desperate to start flying people again. Now, this x-axis here is actually really interesting to me as a data scientist. This is what the question was about before, the quality of the data. Is it really bad and vulnerable and not verified? Or is it super secure and have a huge, huge level of accuracy? Let's plot some of the things that are happening. I'm sorry, there's a person from CETA here. I love CETA, but you guys had a data breach. No one likes open data. No one likes having to tell their passengers that they were affected. And also, no one likes feeling that they're holding sensitive data when they don't have to. However, this is still happening. Common Pass also did something super interesting using mobile ID. I tried it on my phone. It was actually really fancy. Has anyone tried Common Pass? Ooh, no one in the room. This is the answer why digital identity has not been adopted by passengers, because we're not ready for it. And also, it requires you to put in a hell of a lot of personal information. And I mean a lot. Both your identity information and your health information. And it holds it in a central way. They promise that they then delete it, but again, it leaves you vulnerable as a passenger. Yes, question. How many passports? I only have one. I know, I'm disappointed too. I have a British passport and no else. I speak a lot of languages, but very sadly, I only have one passport. Do you have many? Yes, yes, yes. This is an absolutely key question. You're right. In fact, this gentleman hit on the point of what is identity, and is it even connected to your health data? When you go to take your health test, can you bring any of your passports? Yes, of course you can. Is your vaccine record even connected to your passport? Probably not, because vaccines were designed to stop people dying, not to connect them to identity. And now that we've done vaccines largely in the developed world, here in the UAE, the vaccines have gone through the roof, only now we're thinking, oh wait, we need these to travel? We need to connect them to identity? How are we going to do that? This is absolutely key, and we'll address that very briefly. You're about 5 slides ahead. Can you hold your question? All right, thank you. Let's just go through what the industry is trying to do, guys. Verifly. This is a British Airways solution. Has anyone tried this? Yes. What did you have to do? Just shout out, Matthew. Yeah, picture of your face. Picture of a passport. Pictures of a vaccination card, yeah. Picture of a PCR, yeah. Type in extra, what information did you have to type in? Okay. Emergency contact, contact details, telephone details, email, probably a way to contact you. And then you manually add your flight information. Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I see. So it helps you find the flights. Right. Yes, you have to type in your passenger reference. That's right. Matthew is saying it doesn't just come up here to actually type it in, selected. Some other hands went up. How was Verifly for you, sir? Didn't feel comfortable about what out of interest? The fact that you're sharing your personal data with an app? Yeah, I get that. You're 5 slides ahead as well, but I think it's important for people in the room who haven't tried it to hear other people's experiences in the context. I have tried all the apps on my phone because I was desperate to sleep in the last 6 months instead of building this product. But we ended up building something else slightly differently. But I'm really interested in experiences because Verifly actually is not a technology company. It's over 150 people in Heathrow doing an amazing job of manually looking at the documents you've uploaded. So instead of you coming to the airport and saying, here's my phone, zoom into it, here's my passport, look at my data, somebody else in the back office is doing this as a huge favor to us passengers. When it works, it's brilliant. But I got a message on LinkedIn yesterday to say, Verifly gave me an okay. This is a message from a chap called Brian. He's in the industry. And when he came with his boarding pass on Verifly, when he came to a gate to go to security, unfortunately sent him all the way back because somebody in the office didn't finish verifying the data. That does happen because human beings are humans. We're fallible. We're not machines. And the problem with Verify, as this gentleman identified, is you're uploading a lot of personal data centrally. You're building a box full of valuable data. If I'm a nefarious attacker, I'm going to go right after it. That is really valuable for me. So the centralized data doesn't quite work if you want the top security. Yes, sir, you've got a question. Yes. No one knows who Verifly is. Correct. You just know it's an app that's promoted by an airline. Seat is a well-known name, yep. 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 Yeah. So the question, if I may repeat, actually you're a few clicks ahead. Let's just go through some of these guys. You're here. IATA Travel Pass was the holy grail of the industry. I was waiting for it. I travel a lot. I've been on 10 flights in 2 weeks. And actually, it was really exciting when it came out. So this gentleman said it's a problem of adoption. Who tried IATA Travel Pass here? How long did it take you to sign up? Not long. So this lady said it didn't take that long to sign up, but the test had to only be from a specific lab. So it's the lab adoption that slowed you down because then you had to go to a specific lab. Who else tried IATA Travel Pass here? Do you want to talk about your experiences? Issues getting it to read your passport on sign up. What do you mean by significant issues? The app kept freezing. Yeah, it's hard. Ooh. Yep. And you're representing 50% of people who try out a travel pass. They have to do exactly what you did. They have to stop the upload, stop the sign-up process, delete the app, restart their phone just as you did, and then try again. You're determined, and most people are not. They just want to fly. Who else had experiences? You had one with IATA Travel Pass. How did it go for you? Taking your selfies. Yeah. You're a very digital customer. I'm glad you like taking your selfies, but it does require angles because it's trying to establish liveness, that you're a live person, not a picture on a wall and you're trying to be that. Anyone else had experiences with IATA they want to share? You had to uninstall it. And then what? Didn't bother again. Why, though? You went to Verify because you'd used it before, correct? Got it. So it was less painful to go through that process. Yes. And this is the onboarding challenge that the gentleman over here asked me about, the adoption challenge. It's two-sided. It's not just us as passengers. It's also the labs, the technicians. And everything you described, all of the problems you heard about any mobile onboarding, you have to think about the lab technicians who are trained medical professionals. They're not IT people. They're not even digital. Some of them don't have smartphones. They get given the lab app, and they have to take selfies and create profiles for their surgeries, for their testing centers. And that adoption was super hard, even for IATA, with an army of consultants, the resources of the world's airlines, who are all members of IATA, minus very significant players who are actually working with us now. And all of the IATA members who are governments were promoting it as well. So it's not a question of resources, because the reason that failed is the technology was not simple enough. You can throw money and consultants on this problem, but adoption will not happen if people get frustrated. And whether those people are traveling or they work in a medical center, you have to make it easy. And we'll talk about how in a minute. Of course, I wouldn't be here if I couldn't tell you that we are here, that we're super secure. But I'll tell you why and how, because we want to look at a whole picture of your options for commercial flight today. So we talked about the airport process already. We talked a lot about third-party apps that you've experienced. And this is more or less the back office of the likes of Verifly, because there is a huge cost behind the scenes that we don't see. These numbers are actual figures from our clients. We ask them, what are you spending on this? Do you need our software? Maybe you don't. Someone in the Far East said to me, well, we have a very low-cost staff force. That's great. Use your low-cost staff to deal with problems. It turns out they don't want to do this, and guess why? Because staff make human error. They're not machines. And at scale, it's extremely difficult to have the operational staff behave like machines and approach the data security and integrity in the way that we need them to. Any questions on this before I go into the detail? Because I'm going to explain to you how we do things in a second. Shall I continue? All right, thanks guys. So, let me tell you how Zamna Verified Health works. We have two sides as an example, and we'll talk about vaccines separately. We work with vaccines as well. But on this side, you have any health test provider. And on that side, you have your airline. And today, the reality is, we need two things to happen. Not one, two. Accurate data is not enough. If I know Shane's passport details, and I've given him the wrong test to do, he's not going to fly. But then accurate rules alone are also not enough. If Matthew knows the rules to come here, but he's given me the wrong passport details, he can't board either. Does that make sense? This is in the ideal world, guys, right? This is the future of how we're traveling. And this is today. This is the reality today. Now, everyone talks about there's no standards, and we spoke about this yesterday a little bit. There is an ICAO standard document we all use, but the reality is there's so many different systems. And this is what you've all experienced from different countries. You can't get to a point where you have one system with one agreement. And if we're hoping for governments to agree globally, I mean, it'll be 2055, and the governments will still be debating what the standard is. That's just the reality of our world. So we have to do something about it. Now, some airlines actually tried to do this in the early days. They were emailing passengers, or they were sending passenger data to health test centers, true story, and saying, hey, these are our passenger names. Can you tell us if they have any tests? You can imagine how that looks like for GDPR and any data privacy. Welcome, guys, come on in. And the reality is, this happened out of desperation, out of true desperation for flying. So, if you remember anything from today, this is the only slide you should remember. Take a picture if you'd like. Zamna is actually a little bit like me. It speaks different languages. So I speak about 9 languages, I understand about 11, but I'm talking about the language of mathematics here. Zamna can take super sensitive data from different sources and translate it into a common language of math. And it's really super interesting because this is what my research at Oxford was about almost 20 years ago. I've just given away my age. Don't ask my age. But I did this research on a very old topic. This was underpinned by blockchain technology research, and blockchain is almost 30 years old. I'm not that old, but it's an old load of research. And nobody cared about blockchain until we had cryptocurrencies. Equally, nobody cared about this mathematical translation until we really needed to match different sensitive documents using the same language. So Zamna translates super sensitive data into mathematical signals, and that's not all. Shall I show you how it works in practice? All right, we're nodding. There's only 2 steps. Step 1, and please hold your questions till the end of step 1, because you'll have questions, I hope. We'll see how it works with health providers. So today, this purple environment is the tech environment of your health provider. This is not an app. This all happens in the back end, and we make sure it's running within 2 hours. It's super fast. And this is what we're lastly building. Today, you do 2 things. You come to a test provider, as you said before, you give them your yellow data. This represents your passport. You take a green test. And they do something clever with it. They put it together into a really juicy open data set, and then they say, good luck. Upload it into an app. Print it out and bring it to an airport. It might let you get on a plane. It might not. Not our problem. Good luck, passenger. And that is where the problem is. If we stop here, we can't restart travel at scale, because the airline staff have to zoom into this data to make sure that this is equal to your passport, to make sure that this green data is the right test date. And if it's not right, people go and change it, as I said. There's a 60% level of fraud. So this is not enough. Here's what Zamna does extra. We give the health test provider a tiny bit of software that runs itself in the background. This is the bit that translates the information. They don't have to take a selfie. They don't have to download an app. They don't have to learn to do anything. At the point at which the test is created, there's an automatic little ping that comes in here, and it does this. It creates a signal. This is the mathematical translation. It's like going from English to Spanish or Arabic to French, but it's going from data to cryptographic, anonymized mathematical data. But that's not enough. That's not secure enough. We then take that. This then leaves the environment into Zamna, and we break it into 1 million pieces like a mirror that's been sharded. It's actually a mathematical technique called sharding. And this is the decentralized bit. This is the blockchain part of my work as a researcher and as an academic. And this process from 3 to 4 to 5, if you were to go back from 5 to 4 to 3 to 2, how long would it take you using modern computers? Oh, but you heard that yesterday. It's correct. Thank you. My gentleman from CETA correctly said between 1 million and 10 million years. So you can do it, but it's not very attractive. Importantly, this is what we've done for passports with our clients, including British Airways, and actually pre-COVID, we were doing exactly this with Emirates for passport data, because passport data is also not accurate and not secure enough. Does anyone know how many spellings of the name Mohammed exist? The GDRFA here in Dubai told me 17 types to spell the name Mohammed. If you're looking for a particular Mohammed, you need to spell it right. And if you want to treat a particular Mohammed as a business class passenger with privileges, you need to know your customer. So we've created a mathematical signal. Let's come back to health data. And there's only the second step. How does the airline actually use it? How does it consume the mathematical signals? Who works in airline IT here? One person. Facilitation. We have some airline people. Is there anyone from an airline? Yes. Okay, there's people from an airline. But we don't like IT. We know how difficult airline IT is, do we? If you ask IT to make any changes, it will take you a long time, because it's probably built on pretty old processes that didn't have to change for many years. So very importantly, this blue system represents airline IT as it is today. And this is the key. This is the only data set that the airline and your IT guys have to ask me as a passenger for. The only thing that you need for the whole thing to work is your passport, your ICAO standard travel document. It works with national identity cards. It works with any document that you can use for international travel. And here's what happens in the background. as if by magic. The airline already has our little software, and three things happen inside the Zamna software in the airline system. Do you remember we created a little signal using yellow data before? Well, all it does is goes in and it matches the signals on that yellow data. Because it had some green data in it, we can also unlock the associated green data. Super important, guys. This is without Zamna seeing or knowing what the data is. It's like a blindfold and blind matching. It is double blind matching. And guess what? If there's no match, we'll tell the airline. It's not green, it's red. You need to go and tell the passenger it's red. But that's not enough. We also have those travel rules that we talked about before. These are our tech partners. They're pulling in the travel rules live 1,000 times a day. And what it gives you is accurate data on identity and health, and accurate rules at that point in time for your journey. I can see people taking pictures of the slides. Please do if you need to, but I think the organizers are going to circulate the whole deck. Alex, is that right? They're saying yes. This is also recorded if you want to watch a playback or show it with your teams. Let me show you how our clients use this. Shall I continue or shall I pause for questions? Everyone's nodding. All right. Well, this is a good sign. So here we have a passenger who maybe isn't digital. My stepfather is 85. He's a professor at Oxford University. He teaches economics. He's super smart, but he hates apps. He is not going to download another app. And most people won't either. Only something like 20% of people even tried to download one of the digital identities. The world is not ready. And if you live in a country, which ICAO says no country left behind, if you live in a country where you only have access to internet through an internet cafe or your neighbor's PC, you have to have solutions that work for you, not just for your neighbor with a super smart smartphone. So in the beginning of this flow, there's a huge question mark. And guess what? This is what happens today, every day when you fly. You're a question mark. You might be a frequent flyer. Do they recognize your passport? Maybe. It might be saved and out of date. Do they recognize that you already have a vaccination certificate? Maybe. Maybe not. Those question marks have to be replaced with valid, high-integrity data. So this is what happens. That question mark of data comes in using, again, the one anchor we need, the existing global standard that doesn't need to wait for governments to agree on, your ICAO standard travel document. This then allows you to connect any existing mathematical signals of accurate data on your health or vaccines. I will go into vaccines in one moment. And apply the rules. You have to do no uploads and no scans. You do not have to put the liability on the passenger because you're trusting the data. And you're trusting machine data, not human readable data. You are literally one click ahead. Here's your answer. Goes into DCS. So the question was, does the SDK then write a message into a departure control system? Depends how your system is set up. So the DCS is the one place we know our clients like to put a flag in because right now, online check-in is disabled. In fact, let's ask our airline colleagues, which airlines have disabled online boarding passes? Oh, no one's showing hands. Yeah, there is a hand kind of going. Oh, come on, British Airways have done it, Emirates have done it. You can't go and get a boarding pass unless you somehow personally stand in front of a person and they say, let me check your documents. That's okay. It's because you can't trust the data, because it's self-asserted data. It's data the passengers are claiming to have. I don't necessarily have a test. I'm telling Emirates I have a test. Do I really have a test? How can you check today? You can't. Until now. So then, what do we do with this green tick? It can go into your airport ops. It can unlock online check-in. And this is super key for flights, especially where the regulations are not high risk. Our customers love using this for business and first-class passengers. because these are the passengers that get frustrated. They've paid so much money and they have to queue and manually check things. They don't want that experience. We just signed our first contract with a private airline. I never dreamed of working in private aviation. It's a different world to commercial aviation. But their problem is the same. Their passengers have paid a huge premium for a private plane, not even for a seat. And they're having to email and call them and say, we need your documents. Have you checked it? Are you sure? Is this the right timing? Can you upload it? Can you email it to us? It is a true friction that stops people from restarting travel. So really, really important to reiterate, there was a really genuine concern from the gentleman at the back that I live and die by. Personal data should stay personal data. Shouldn't go on your phone, it shouldn't be personally uploaded anywhere, it shouldn't be shared, it shouldn't be consented. So anyone in the middle who's running these systems should have a double, triple blind technology, because you can match data without needing to know what it is. Or you can say there's a mismatch. It's incorrect. So there's no storing, seeing, or controlling data. Should we talk about vaccines? Who here is vaccinated out of interest? Who used a vaccine to travel? Did you have to show your vaccine? You did? Give me a perspective.
Still giving from a different perspective. The way that stuff is done now with the Vision 2030 in Saudi Arabia, as opposed to one of the first slides that you showed, where it goes, where it shows the trickling down from the government to the airline to the passenger.
Yes.
Ours actually doesn't sit between the airline and the passenger, it sits between the government and the airline.
Right.
So all vaccination records, everything goes into the National Information Center in Saudi Arabia.
Can I just pause you for a second and tell the room what you're saying?
Yeah.
All right, so this gentleman here is from Saudi Arabia, correct? He's saying that actually it's the pressured triangle that we discussed from the governments to the airlines to the passengers in Saudi Arabia. All of the vaccines you're saying, correct me if I'm wrong, sit between the government and the airline. Is that correct?
That's right.
All right.
So in the National Information Center, everything from the Ministry of Health to the passport control to even, because I brought my kids with me, even their health insurance to cover COVID is all tied into the central platform.
Let me just repeat that for the room to hear. So in Saudi Arabia, which is actually a very centralized government and a very digital government, similar to Estonia, similar to UAE, all of the health records, insurance, and data sets to do with your health and identity are tied into the government central service, correct?
Exactly.
All right.
So I checked in online actually for my flight.
Yep.
Showed up at the airport. Of course, if I had any issues, they would have just rejected me right away from there. So there was no additional steps. I showed up an hour and a half, 2 hours before the flight.
Yeah.
Checked my badge and that was it.
So that's your departure, presumably from your home country.
Correct.
And also presumably, when we talk about the industry of the airlines, you know, surely we have to have a view that most governments are not digital. Saudi Arabia, UAE, especially in the Middle East region, I would include in Europe, Estonia is one of the digital governments. Most other governments have no idea. They have no central system. In the UK alone, we have over 200 different health systems just for one country. If the whole world was like this, you're right, the problem would be solved and I could go back to sleep. And I wouldn't have to even talk about vaccines because, as we said before, vaccines were designed to stop people dying. They were not designed to connect them to a digital identity. Some countries did a better job than other countries of identifying you and creating a digital record. Spain actually did all right. They have a Spanish app. I actually queued with my friend for her vaccine. It appeared in her app. But then another friend came to the same queue and they said, you never had your first dose. Oh, yes, I did. I need the second dose. Well, you can't get the second dose. You still need the first dose. No, guys, I need the second dose. Here's my paper. So it's the level of digitality that really drives this. This is part of ICAO's No Country Left Behind initiative. Because even if you're from Saudi Arabia, which is brilliantly digital, if you're flying from the UK on a UK airline, they have no way to connect to your brilliant digital system. Because guess what? Governments are even worse than airlines at sharing data. And it's actually even more politically charged To say, imagine I say to the Saudi government, I'm a representative from the UK and I want all your citizens' data so I can match against it. So that matching against open data is what's stopping us from restarting at scale. Go for it.
Excuse me.
Yes. Oh, we have a microphone. Excellent. Perfect. I love how heated this debate is getting.
I was just wondering, where do you get the passport information from anyway? Are you taking it from the government, or are the people uploading it manually, or how's it done?
That's a great question. We had exactly the same challenge yesterday from the audience. My answer is twofold. Number one, the ideal world would be, can all the governments agree, please, and check the passport data against the government sources? That doesn't happen. Actually, the UK government just offered airlines to check their data against the government passport data set. Does anyone know how much they're charging for this? Have a guess. For each passport. £8. £8 for 30,000 passengers a day. No one's going to pay that. So actually, it's impossible. It is genuinely impossible to get data at source. So we do the same thing with passports that we do with vaccines. You have to see it once before you can verify against it. You cannot operationalize a data set you have never seen. If Shane has never flown on my airline, I will ask him for his data today. But what happens when you're flying tomorrow? Have you only ever shown your passport once to an airline?
The actual application that we're using is called Tawakkalna in Saudi Arabia.
Say that again, the actual?
The application that we're using, it's called Tawakkalna, the one that I was speaking to you about earlier. And it's accepted in multiple countries. They're getting, I think the government's getting approvals to use it in different countries. I think the UAE is one of the ones that accepts it also. So we'll find out. We'll find out in the next few days how it works.
To be honest, we are getting there in very small percentages. You are probably in the 1%, if you think about it.
Yeah.
You're in the 1% of the country whose government is really thinking digitally and trying to negotiate with other governments to recognize it. But as an airline flying between two governments, you're still stuck in the middle, because the regulations still say you have to see a document and you have to check it. Even if you have a digital identity valid in this country, it's not portable. If you have a vaccine today in Russia, it's not accepted in some of the countries. In Russia alone, there are over 200 forms of passports that are valid. 200 valid passports. Only 2% of those are ICAO standard valid for international travel. So when you think of the fragmentation, really unfortunate fragmentation of the world today, the fact that Saudi Arabia is thinking about tomorrow is actually an exception. That's not the rule, very sadly. Most people don't come with the digital identity to the passport check. They actually have printouts, they have physical documents. And with vaccines, most people have them on paper. Only a small percentage, mostly in Europe, and we can talk about this shortly, have them in an app. And again, these are people with very fancy smartphones, people who have charged their batteries, people who have reception, who have data. 90% of passengers don't have their vaccines in those. Yes, question.
Yeah, there's just one thing I'm missing, and excuse me if you've, if you've already covered it. How does my single ICAO standard passport that I have on me get into this system?
Let's go back for a second.
Apologies.
No, don't apologize. We actually didn't talk about the creation of the signal. It's here. So this could be either the test provider or the airline checking your passport.
Where?
At the airport when their machine reading it. When the airline checks the passports today, this was our product before COVID.
Okay.
You come to the airport as you always did, and what's the first question they ask?
Passport.
Please, may I have your passport, sir?
Okay.
Now, most of the time you will see a swipe taking place. This is because they overwrite whatever data you've put in. The quality of passport data, and this is now research from us that's been adopted by IATA as a standard figure, the quality of self-entered passport data, do you know what percentage of that has errors in it? Have a guess.
No idea.
50%. It's as easy as 50-50 to make a typo. And do you know what the top error fields are? You'll laugh. The #1 field people make mistakes when putting in their passport data is their name. Because their name is not the same as what's in their passport. #2 field? Anyone? Number. Passport number. Nationality, drop down. There was a security incident at an airport in the UK because a team of football players, this is a true story, couldn't be bothered with that drop down of nationality, and they just chose Afghanistan as the first country. So the UK National Security thought, we have 20 people coming from Afghanistan on a flight. We're not expecting this. What happened? A security alert. Was this a good use of time and resources? Not really. But in truth, the quality, one moment, madam, the quality of that passport data, can we get a mic over here, please? The quality of that passport data gets corrected by the airline swiping your document every time that they have an interaction with your document. The problem with that is that once they've done it once, what happens tomorrow? It's like, we've never seen you again, please give me your passport, I'm going to swipe it again. That was what we were solving before COVID. What happens now is that this document with Zamna can have a digital green signal, like a reputation score for your data. And that can live separately. You're separating the trust from the seriously sensitive data. So when you then put in your document, you can recognize that you've seen that data before without having a copy of it. And with vaccines, we do the same thing. You have to check a vaccine once and connect it to a swiped passport. That's why here, sorry, I'll come to your question 1 second. Let me just skip forward. We have machine-readable vaccines almost nowhere. Almost nowhere. They were issued in a hurry to stop people dying. And that was a huge problem. Oh, let's go back. So here, you have to start with a passport, and you're right, if there's no passport signal, you can't check it. We can't verify something you've never verified before. We can't go and ask the government. But chances are, you've probably flown before. Or if you've flown once to go somewhere, you're probably coming back. So you'll take at least 2 flights. And then you can connect other data sets to that. You're nodding, so I'll move on to this lady question. Hi, how are you?
Hi. You partially answered the question about the vaccine certificate. What about the COVID test? Where does the data come from?
That's a really good question as well. Let me go ahead and go back. I'm so glad I have my clicker. So COVID tests are really interesting because airlines, here we go. Airlines already have recommended COVID test providers. All of the airlines we work with really didn't like one thing about IATA. IATA told the airlines that they have to work with that provider over there. And that really meant that the airline couldn't negotiate rates for testing at scale. This was a huge issue in Asia when we started work there. So what Zamna does is says, let's not point to the test provider. Whenever we work with an airline, we do 2 things. Number 1, we run a free pilot for 1 month on 1 city pair that the airline chooses. And in that city pair, so it could be Madrid to Miami, London to Lisbon, they choose their preferred health partners that they're already commercially in a relationship with. And the airline gives them the same SDK that we've given the airline, the same little translator. And then they speak the same language of mathematics. 90% of the time, the airlines already know who their top health providers are. Or, for example, in Portugal, we have a health partner with an airline who has a platform. These guys have built a health lab platform. In England, there's a similar thing. There's a similar thing here, actually, in the UAE. There are providers teaming up together to get a network of coverage. So it's the opposite approach to IATA, who are saying, we're going to pick this lab over here. Good luck, airlines. You got to work with them. So we flip that around. And then, because the health test centers are in partnership with the airline when you book your ticket, will say you should use this provider if you want the seamless process on that city pair. So as a passenger, I'll book my ticket first. And I will see, oh, they recommend these providers? Yes. All of the people using Verifly probably found out about Verifly because of an airline website. You don't find out about it anywhere else because you're thinking, well, there's my ticket, so what else do I need to do? And as a passenger, we actually did a survey. Psychologically, passengers really hold airlines accountable. It's not the airline's fault. It's a government regulation. But as a passenger, guess who gets blamed? The airline. So we make the airline part of the answer. All right, question.
So you talked about kind of having credibility and reputation. If I get a new passport, do I get to keep my reputation like from the previous one? Does it move on?
That's a really good question. So the point is, actually, this gentleman asked me about multiple passports. Many passengers have multiple form of ICAO standard identity, or indeed you can get a new document. The question is, does your digital reputation stay when your document gets expired? And the answer is really simple. Yes, but we have to reconnect it. So you would go through the process as it is, but the reality is in your national travel document, whether it's a new document or another country, your name is still the same, your date of birth is still the same, your country of birth is still the same. The only things that have changed is the document references, not your identity attributes. And our software reconnects it so you don't have to lose all of that reputation that you've built up in the credibility of your data. So we separate the credibility from the underlying data. All right, question here and here and here. All right, let's go in order, is that all right?
Yeah, who's the customer here? Now we're talking, the airline is your customer, right?
Say this again, who is the?
Customer, Zamna's customer. Who's Zamna's customer? The airline, the government?
So Zamna's customers are airlines because the governments punish airlines for not getting this right, but the beneficiaries are governments. I spoke to our Minister for Aviation yesterday, and I actually spoke to the Minister for Digital last month, and they know, so Border Force in the UK are very familiar with us. Today, later, I'm seeing GDRFA in Terminal 3. The governments are huge beneficiaries of this, but the reality is the public sector never is a first adopter. They look to you guys as the industry to show them the way.
And I assume, of course, Zamna is a commercial entity, so how do you commercialize your offering? Is it per transaction or it's a service, monthly recurring charges?
The question is, how do we commercialize it? Well, we have to keep the lights on. So if you're calling Zamna signals 100 million times a day versus 2 times a day, it costs us more or less. So we align it to the volume.
To the volume, transactional.
Yes, correct.
Thank you.
But very importantly, those transactions are a lot cheaper than the manual transactions that we're talking about today. So we have 2 other questions at the back. Hi, guys.
Yeah, hi. What's it called? I have 2 questions.
You have 2 questions. Go for it.
Okay. So in Saudi, we have our own verified labs in every country. We cannot go to any lab.
Yeah.
Okay. How does Zamna incorporate that into their system?
When you have your own labs verified into a government portal centrally, it's a really unusual situation, and it's the best situation you can have. We then approach the government's central conversation directly. This is why later today I'm going to talk to GDRFA. Here in the UAE, it's very centralized as well. It's fantastic. But 9 times out of 10, this is not the case. The governments require the labs globally to write into the government portal to report on tests.
Yes.
But they don't have a read and write 2-sided function. So a lot of the times we will look for accreditations. In the UK, there is only 10 accredited UCAS labs. In Portugal, there's actually a list. In the UAE, there's a very short list. So we have to be very careful how we select our testing partners and our lab partners, or indeed how we include the government in the conversation.
Okay. Then comes the other fold of it.
The other?
The other fold of it. How can you ensure that information is accurate? How can you ensure that information is accurate?
Or the information that comes from the test centers?
The test centers, yes.
You're right. If the data here, you mean if the data here is incorrect in your passport or in your test? Which one?
Regardless of where is the mistake, because we were talking about how the passenger is taking liability.
Yes.
Is Zamna going to accept the liability of the PCR and then the passport information and everything else? Because this was the big question that you asked in the beginning. And
where the liability is, 100%. So we accept the liability for matching data. Remember that all of this is meaningless unless I come to your airline and give you my passport data to say, hey, I would like to fly, which is what I did before COVID. If I then give you my yellow data, let me show you this bit. If I give you this and Zamna cannot match it, then there is no match. We will not match incorrect data. If we do say there is a match, and there is a health data match, then that is something in our control. So of course we can accept liability because data doesn't lie. Data is precise. It's not human readable, it's machine read data. So this element of liability actually gets replaced with precision data matching. Today, what's your best alternative? What are you doing?
Manual checking.
Manual checks. How well do they work? Depends on the person doing them, right? So you're replacing the question mark of this integrity of data with only exact data matching. Very importantly, if we think that some of this data is matched, but maybe someone made a typo, because it's easy, and if you have overwritten it, we can go, oh, it's now green. But if it's manual, it's red, we tell the airline this is red. So we don't just make everyone green, we help you know before the passenger comes to your airport. Because remember, this starts here, from when I'm at home, or in my internet cafe. So you will have to manually check some passengers. Not everyone will get this green tick. But if they do, that's 100% accurate. And if they get a red, then you know before I come to the airport. So if we go forward in our presentation, we've talked about vaccines, we've talked about IATA Travel Pass. Oh, the reviews are hilarious, by the way. I didn't write them. But what's really interesting, oh, I don't have this here. What's really interesting is we're replacing manual process for 100% of all of you with just this section who we know is red. Then this section who you know is green, you can process differently. This section maybe hasn't even checked in. But then you're changing your ability to segment processes, and that's what unlocks scale. And very importantly, none of them have to download anything. None of them have to share data. None of them have to sit there. Yesterday, I met with one of the biggest health providers here in UAE and in Abu Dhabi. He told me, as an MD, as a CEO of a company, that his staff today are wasting half an hour per traveler if they're trying to use some digital app. I said, why? Why are your staff wasting time? Because we're trying to help the passenger. They have to come to our lab, they have to scan some QR code, then they have to download something, then they have to provide the data, then we have to upload the data. All of this friction means you're not restarting at scale, and you're not doing it while people are at home. When you can email them saying, can you try this again? Your data is red, it's not green. He's nodded his head. I had another question at the back. Hello, how are you?
Yes, good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Just a quick question, if I've missed something. We have a problem in South Africa with fraudulent documents.
Yes.
So you're relying on the integrity of the passenger to provide authentic data. So if they're producing a fraudulent vaccination information or PCR coding, how would we benefit from this?
As the lady at the back has just made my job super easy. Self-asserted data cannot be trusted. Absolutely 100% correct. We actually replace that with a mathematical process. So forgive me if I'll repeat myself briefly, But whenever you do data matching, you have to match it against something, right? You can't just say, give me your data, oh, I know it's good. You just can't do that. You have to think, you know, in South Africa, in the UK, it's the same. 60% fraud rate on PCR testing, mostly on dates, because people want to travel. They don't want to pay. So, instead of trusting the passenger, we have a way of checking the data at source with a health test provider. Because the software, and apologies to the room, we've gone through this earlier a little bit. I think you guys arrived just after. Let me go through it quickly. At source, you already have to give your details to the test provider if you want to travel. You give your yellow passport details and you do your green test. And then they put them together. And then at this point, you have to go and prove to the airline you've done it. But you don't have a way to actually prove it. I'll tell you a story what happened to me 2 days ago. I was in front of a check-in counter at British Airways, and I gave them my PCR test. And accidentally, the lab put my date of birth as my date of test. So I was 3 days old on paper. No, 2.5 days old. The check-in agent felt so sorry for me. She was apologizing. She said, I'm so sorry. I can't check you in. You will be denied boarding. Okay, I have to make a phone call. I was early. I stayed calm. I phoned the lab. I had to say, guys, they have to get a proper certificate. They don't trust me that I did the test because the data's wrong. Took 25 minutes of breathing. But they emailed me a new certificate. I showed it to them, and I was checked in. The truth is, this is where the problem happens. So with Zamna, we give them the same bit of software that we give the airlines, so they can translate the sensitive data into a mathematical signal. And only after this, you get this mathematical signal, then the airline can receive the signal because I'm giving you, the airline, my passport. So only from the passport, I can then ask Zamna, hey, do you have a match for the yellow data? And do you have a match for the green data? And I don't have to call the lab. So we're replacing the physical phone call between the airline and the lab with a digital call of data. And super importantly, this can happen when I'm at home putting my passport to check in. Does that answer your question? She gave me a thumbs up. Thank you so much. All right, guys, we have 10 minutes left. I think we covered a lot today. We talked a little bit about travel rules, and I want to just come back to this. The reality is that travel rules are changing so much, it is mind-blowing. And yet, for a machine, for a computer, it's not that bad. It's really not that hard, as long as the rules are codified. We talked a little bit earlier about how thematic is very manual. Thematic is designed as a book for check-in staff to use, for customers to be able to look at if they want to. Our partners are very digital. They take those rules from the governments, they scan governments' websites every day, thousands of times a day, to update those rules, about 1,000 times a day in the end. And those digital rules get coded by technology people so that we can do both of those things. We can have the accurate data at source without having to connect the sources. And we can also, inside Zamna, apply accurate rules. This is super important. Because if we didn't have either, we couldn't solve this. We really need both. So, we talked about how you use the green tick. Because when the passenger comes in, the data is still unknown. Very, very, very importantly, what happens today when you fly? Do they treat you any different when you fly tomorrow? No. You'll be told the same thing. Please, can I have your document? Please, can you have your test? Please, can I have your vaccine? This will happen every single time, even if you're flying on the same day on a connecting flight. And guess why? Because that's the only way to trust the data. The industry says if you want to trust it, see it yourself. Does it help to unlock scale? Not really. So this is where Zamna comes in, because you have no uploads and no scans. You can actually remove this process from your airport, and if you so choose, and as I said, we do pilots for free for every airline, although we have a waiting list right now, for a city pair to show how this works. It takes us 1 week to get this going, because the software was built 100% by airline people for airline people. My entire development team comes from aviation. 100% of my product team comes from airlines. It's actually been great. COVID has allowed me to hire the best aviation talent that's been leaving airlines. But very importantly, you can also have these read. You can know that when somebody's at home and they've done the wrong data sets, or they haven't provided you with something, you can email them or call them and say, hey, you need to go and do that again. You can push the liability to the passenger, but you're starting to get more and more data. So you're able to cleanse your data from 100% of question marks before people arrive to the airport to maybe 20% of green, maybe 50% of green. I actually wanted to upload something. We have 10 minutes today. Alex, can I connect my laptop directly to this? I need a feed. I need a live feed. I have something really fun to show you guys. You're going to have to promise me it doesn't leave the room, because no one's seen this before in the world. We've just built this. And it's live. Let me just go behind. He says I can't do live? I have to do it on a... Can you connect me? Sorry? Don't have the connection. We can't do Wi-Fi? All right, well, I'll show it to you guys on my laptop, and you can come and play with it later if you want. But I'm really excited about it, and I'm going to stop here. So, I'm just going to hold it up. It's the wonder of Zamna. Can you see my tiny little screen? So, this is a live Zamna kind of passenger load that you can play with. You can play with what you're spending on different types of transactions, how much it's costing you, and what percentage you can automate. If you guys want to come and play this on my laptop, please do. I'm happy to just leave it on the table for you to play with. We've just designed it with our early clients because they tell us that they really like to see the savings of, say you put only 10% of passengers through these green ticks. What will it give me? How do I compare it? It's all about your transactions and minimizing the expensive manual transactions. We talked about vaccines. Any more questions about vaccines? Yes.
Irra, I just had a quick question. You mentioned at the front there about, on the previous slide, around online check-in. So
here,
does Zamna integrate with the online check-in of the airline rather than being app-based?
Correct.
Fantastic.
So it's not just the online check-in, but you can surface the data, if you want, into your app. Zamna's agnostic. If you want a Zamna signal in your app, be my guest. Yeah. It's a data point. If you want a Zamna signal in online check-in, at any touch point, whether it's kiosk, online, or you can even write a message. We actually have in kiosks in Terminal 5 in British Airways today, you can step behind the counters and it has a little line in Altair, in Amadeus, saying Zamna validated. So you can surface the data in whatever way is convenient to you.
Because that's the game changer, really, isn't it? I mean, because going back to adoption, etc., you're more trusting, because you have to go to the online check-in anyway.
Right.
You're more likely to put your data in one place as opposed to in multiple places.
Right. So this gentleman said that's the game changer for us. That's why we haven't slept in 6 months. We've tried to hack the adoption by taking the passenger out of the process completely. Yes, there's a question there. Can you give the lady a microphone, please?
Hi. I'm just wondering, in terms of sharing of your health data, does the passenger have to consent? Because obviously that's been one of the biggest challenges with identity, biometrics, etc.
Yes, this is a really good question about consent. So when you come to do this bit, at step 1, you already have to consent that this data is used for travel. Now, because your question is about this data, open data, If I was going to take a copy of that as Zamna, I would really need your consent. But we don't. We put you through a process where it's no data, it's mathematical gibberish on purpose, and then it's smashed like 1,000 pieces of a mirror and decentralized, so much so that it takes you millions of years to go backwards. So under data protection, we're separating the super sensitive health data from anything meaningful. The only way it gets reconnected is when you as the passenger actually consent to giving your passport again. And then you're asking to be carried across borders, and you're asking to comply with the regulations so you can enter the country. So the consent is already built into the process. Some of our clients who want to do it in an app, some of the airlines who are really excited about the app element of surfacing it, will ask for consent if they want you to upload open data of your actual certificate. So that's the data that you saw here. That is the bit they need to do, because that's actually really sensitive. If someone hacks all of the airline's supply of test data, that's a national embarrassment. Which is why our clients really like working with us, because we take that and we make it meaningless to attackers. So the consent element is still relevant, but a lot less risk with us, and it's inherent in the process. Yes, there's a question here. Can we just pass the mic? And there's two more. I won't forget about you guys. There's some questions here. We have 5 minutes, 39 seconds. I love this debate. This is great.
You said that Zamna takes responsibility if there is a data mismatch.
Correct.
But my understanding is that you also kind of replace a timatic. Replace timatic because whatever information is required by the government regulations, it's already integrated into your platform. So does Zamna take responsibility as well if that information is incorrect?
So the partners that we already are integrated with, they already have this information. And in terms of responsibility and liability, they have terms and conditions that are saying, look, it's as good as it can be at this point in time. So there is limitations, of course, to how fast they can update, but it's a lot faster than Tematic. If you want a silver bullet and someone to say, I'll do everything and take all the responsibility, then of course no one in the world is going to do that. But Zamna is a hell of a lot better than anything else out there because we work with data. And if it's matched at that point in time and time stamped, and that is correct at the time, that's truly the best we can do with all the data we have. Yes, sir, you've got a question, then we go back there. Yes, okay. We have a question. I haven't forgotten.
I have two questions. First of all, where are the data matched? Where are the nodes? Where do they sit? That's my first question. Second question, where's the backup? How does it work if the connection or the verification didn't happen?
Great question. I'm just going to be annoying for 1 second. Who understands what blockchain's about? Sort of. Raise your hand. Okay, keep your hand up if you can explain it in 1 minute. There's a hand up, but ultimately, it was a rhetorical question. It was a rhetorical question. The reality of backups on blockchain is that every single node has a copy of the information. And so if you take down 90% of these nodes, there still is a copy of the truth in the system. I actually would like to talk to you separately after because we actually make the nodes a little bit less difficult to run. If anyone's ever heard of nodes, a blockchain, it's long, it takes time, it's cumbersome. Some of the software IP that we've developed with my team is about exactly that, a real-time, light touch node work. That was really difficult for us for about 5 years, and we finally cracked it. But it's a great question, and that's some of the reasons why no one else has done it, because we've patented it. It's a really challenging thing, though. It took us half a decade of life. Thank you. We had a question over here.
Good morning. Thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. I've got two questions.
Yeah.
We always say that we are as weak as the weakest point.
Yes.
So the weakest point is the data provider. How do you ensure that they're compliant with your requirements?
So you mean the data provider, the health data provider?
Yeah.
Correct. We actually had a similar question recently about the standards for health test providers. You're right. it has been the Wild West out there. Anyone could provide any test, and they could even do a bad job of it. And you're correct. What's your option today? If I come to your airline and show you a test, what are you going to do? Do you know if it's any good? So in truth, you're correct. An airline could choose a bad test provider. Zamna does not select them. We ask the airlines, look, it's been 18 months. Who do you get good feedback about? Who does the government regulate? Here in the UAE, you have a very short list of government-regulated ones who the airlines use. In the UK, finally, last month, they cut 50% of providers who were low-integrity data providers. We're seeing there's some sort of a integrity coming in the industry, and we always ask our partner airlines, before we choose the free pilot city pairs, this is the waiting list that we have as long as my arm today, they will tell us, in Madrid and in Miami, these are our top guys, work with them. So that's the airline's choice, and we go with that.
And my last question is at the end of the journey, because we talk about the beginning, but when a customer arrives in a country like UAE,
yeah,
the immigration officer will ask for documentation about all of this data. So what's the point of putting it electronically? We need to ensure that the passengers got it physically to provide it to the immigration guys at the other end.
And it's the same thing that happened before COVID with passports, right? It's the same thing. When I was flying before COVID, when I enter a country, I need to have my physical passport. But guess what? In Europe, no one even checks I have a passport before I get on. They might not check. The reason these checks need to be automated is for the processing of the passenger. The passenger still needs to bring some stuff with them, sure, but that's because the border force and governments will not integrate with anything anytime soon. It's too difficult for them. They're waiting to see what the industry does. But equally, when you're flying before COVID, it's the same story. I could take my passport, get on a plane, flush my passport down the toilet. Everyone in AVSEC knows this story. And then I don't have a passport when I arrive to the border force. So having your document is something that no one can solve. That will not go away for the foreseeable time. But some of the governments, like GDRFA, who I'm seeing later today, they're starting to feed digital things into their decision-making progress. You heard from the gentleman over here from Saudi Arabia, their government is already taking digital inputs and using it to make decisions. So some governments are starting to do that already. All right, guys, there's a question here, and one at the back there with the lady. Can someone get her a microphone, please? Do you have a question? Oh, you're okay. Over there? We're good, right. Final question. Do you have a mic? I'm out of time, but I'll take one last one. This gentleman's been asking.
Sorry, it's not a question, just a comment. The slide you showed at the beginning with the CETA logo,
yes.
I just want to clarify that this is nothing related at all with health data. So it's
correct. It was passenger data.
Yeah, it was passenger data, and I would invite you to get in touch with our communication team to get more information about it, because I see it a little bit out of context, really.
Fair enough,
Yeah.
fair enough. We got it from American Airlines, who were affected by it. So that's who we talked to. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for participating. My contact details should be on the screen. Please email me, Irra@zamna.com, and get in touch if you want any further information. I have my laptop at the front, but it's a break now, so enjoy your coffee. Thank you so much.